Montana Territory, September 1883. The first frost had come early, dusting the tops of the pine trees and leaving the ground brittle beneath boot heels, and that was when Lawson Keene found her. He had ridden out before sunrise, checking the outer fences of his homestead near the Bitterroot Range. A cougar had taken one of his calves the night before. He figured he would find tracks or blood. What he did not expect to find was a woman hiding in his hay barn, curled up behind a stack of feed sacks, clutching a small bundle to her chest like her life depended on it. "Ma'am," Lawson said, stepping back and keeping his voice low. "You do not need to be afraid. You're on my land, but I am not looking for trouble." The woman didn't speak. She looked up, eyes wide, shaking. Her face was streaked with dirt, her dress torn at the hem. She looked like she had been running for days. And tucked against her chest, wrapped in a thin quilt, was a little girl no more than 4, maybe 5, with tangled hair and a tear-streaked face. "I ain't gonna hurt you," Lawson said again, softening his tone. "You hungry?" The woman hesitated, her jaw tight. Then she gave a small nod. Lawson held out his hand, not reaching for her, just letting it hang there between them. "Name's Lawson Keene. I got coffee on the stove and eggs if the hens cooperated. You can sit, eat, and rest. No questions till you are ready." She stared at his hand for a long time before she finally whispered, "Keziah. Keziah Prescott. This is my daughter, Norah." Lawson nodded gently. "Well, Keziah Prescott, you and Norah are safe now." Keziah didn't believe him, not really. But her legs barely held her, and Norah's lips were pale. She followed him. Inside the cabin, the heat from the stove thawed the edge of the cold clinging to her bones. Lawson moved with quiet ease, setting out 2 plates, not asking anything. Norah stayed close to her mother, eyes flicking between the unfamiliar man and the food he placed in front of them. Keziah watched Lawson closely. He looked to be in his early 30s, tall, sun-creased from years of ranch work, with steady hands and a quiet air. There was no wedding ring, no photographs on the mantel, just a worn leather Bible and a rifle hung over the doorway. "Where's your husband?" Lawson asked once Norah had eaten and fallen asleep under a quilt on the settee. His voice was low, not pressing. Keziah flinched. "Dead. A year ago. But it's not him I was running from." Lawson tilted his head, waiting. "My brother-in-law," she said. "After my husband passed, he said he would help us. Said we could stay on the farm. But then he started drinking. Getting mean. He tried to take Norah from me. Said I was unfit. I left in the night. Took a train as far as I could afford, then walked. I didn't know where I was going. Just away." Lawson's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "He follow you?" "I do not know." Her voice cracked. "I just kept going." Lawson nodded once. "Then you got here just in time?" She looked down at her hands. "I will not stay long. I just needed a place for Norah to rest." "You can stay," he said, without hesitation. "Few weeks till the roads freeze. Work to be done before winter. I could use a hand." Keziah stared at him. "Why would you help us?" Lawson's eyes met hers. "Because I have been through nights darker than I care to remember. And someone once gave me a place to rest. I never forgot it." She did not answer, but her fingers brushed his as she reached to take the plate he handed her, and her eyes lingered for a moment longer than they had before. In the days that followed, Keziah found herself breathing again. Lawson gave her space, but not distance. He showed her the root cellar, how to feed the hens, how to turn the soil for the fall onions. Norah followed him like a shadow, laughing for the first time in weeks as she helped him gather kindling. Lawson never asked more than she was willing to share. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Keziah sat on the porch steps, her knees drawn up, watching Norah chase a cat through the grass. "She is smiling again," Lawson said, stepping beside her. She used to laugh all the time, Keziah murmured. Before it all changed. Lawson sat beside her. You are doing right by her. She looked at him, then really looked. You do not even know us. I do not need to, he said. I see how you hold her. I see how you flinch in your sleep. I know fear when I see it. And I know strength when I see that too. Keziah turned her face away, but he saw the tears. I never had anyone talk to me like that, she whispered. Lawson reached over, not touching her, but placing his hand next to hers on the step. Maybe you should have. Weeks passed, and the first snow came. Lawson built a second cot inside, not wanting them in the barn again. Keziah started cooking, sewing patches into his shirts. Norah made drawings on the back of feed sacks and called him Mr. L. They worked side by side, fencing before the frost, harvesting the last of the root vegetables, repairing the roof after a windstorm. Keziah learned to ride the old mare. Norah learned to whistle like a meadowlark. And Lawson, he began to smile more. One night, while Keziah was drying herbs by the fire, Lawson came in with a basket of apples from the north orchard. I thought the deer would have gotten to them, she said. I kept them away, he replied. I planted those trees 5 years back. Took a while for them to bear fruit. She looked at the apples, then up at him. You waited. I had to. She stood slowly, walking over. You are a good man, Lawson Keene. He swallowed. You are a good woman, Keziah Prescott. She stepped closer. I do not feel afraid when I am near you. Lawson's hand reached out, brushing a curl from her cheek. Then stay near. And for the first time in a long, long time, Keziah leaned into someone instead of away. She rested her forehead against his chest, his arms folding around her like they were always meant to be there. Norah stirred on the cot, murmuring in her sleep. Keziah glanced toward her, then looked back up at Lawson. I think we are planting something new, she whispered. Lawson smiled, his voice quiet. And I will make sure it grows. The wind began to change by late October, carrying the scent of turned earth and wood smoke. Days shortened, and the sun hung lower over the Bitterroot Ridge, its light stretched thin across the valley floor. Keziah had taken to rising before first light, often before Lawson, moving about the kitchen in stocking feet with Norah still curled beneath quilts on the cot. She moved with purpose now, not urgency. The difference showed in her hands, less clenched, more steady. Lawson returned one afternoon from the upper pasture with a split in his palm, caught on a rusted gate hinge. Keziah poured boiled water into a tin basin without a word and took his hand with a firmness that surprised them both. That'll fester by morning if left, she said, dabbing the wound with cloth steeped in yarrow. You know your plants, he muttered, watching her fingers work. My mother did, she replied. She kept a ledger of remedies. Taught me before the fever took her. Lawson gave a short nod. You still carry it? Keziah glanced toward her satchel near the hearth. Tucked with what I could manage to take. Pages are worn near through, but her notes hold. He shifted in the chair, flexing his fingers as she wrapped them in clean linen. You could teach others. There's a widow east of here with a boy who coughs through every winter. She asked last year if I knew anyone with sense for healing. Keziah tied the last knot and sat back on her heels. I've never taught. You're doing it now, he said, raising his bandaged hand. One lesson at a time. She looked down, cheeks coloring faintly. I wouldn't know where to begin. Lawson stood, lowering his voice. Begin where you are. That's always enough. That evening, Keziah laid the ledger open across the table. The pages bore faded ink, margins cluttered with delicate script and pressed leaves. Norah climbed into her lap, tracing the petals with a fingertip. What's this one for? She asked, pointing at a dried stalk labeled wild bergamot. Helps when breathing comes hard, Keziah said. Especially when the cold settles deep. Lawson leaned over the table, reading her mother's notes in silence. You write like her, he said after a moment. Keziah stilled. I tried to remember her hand. So Norah might know it someday. Lawson's gaze softened as he reached for the ledger. You mind if I copy some of these? For the widow I mentioned. She nodded, surprised. You read well. Pa taught me letters before he passed. Ma made sure I didn't forget. Keziah smiled then, small but real. She sounds like she had a strong back. She did, he said. Most women do. Just no one bothers to write it down. The next day, while Norah played with the neighbor's hound that had wandered over from the creek, Keziah and Lawson walked the edge of the property. He showed her where the ground dipped near the cottonwoods, where water pooled in spring. She stopped often, plucking stems, noting bark, naming things aloud to herself. You walk like you belong here, Lawson said, watching her crouch by a patch of rabbit tobacco. I never belonged anywhere, she said, not looking up. But I remember my father saying land listens if you step quiet. Lawson ran his thumb along the worn edge of his glove. You ever think of staying? She stood, brushing soil from her skirt. You mean past the first snow? I mean longer than that. Keziah met his eyes, uncertain. Wouldn't be proper. Folks would talk. They already do, he said. But not unkindly. And I don't give much weight to words that come from idle mouths. She didn't answer right away. A hawk passed overhead, its shadow slipping across the grass. I'd need to earn it, she said finally. Not just stay because I'm taken in. You already have, he said. That night, after Norah had fallen asleep beside the hearth with her doll tucked beneath her arm, Keziah lingered at the table, folding fresh linens. Lawson sat nearby, sharpening a knife slowly along a whetstone. You ever think about marriage? She asked, her voice low. He looked up, startled. I have. She studied his face. And didn't make sense before. Too much to fix in myself. Too much quiet. She folded another cloth. And now I see a woman who carries her family with grace, who knows soil and healing and how to keep a fire going through grief. I see a girl who calls me Mr. L like I've always been there. And I think maybe I was waiting for that, he said. Keziah met his gaze, steady. I never thought I'd trust a man again. I won't ever ask you to, he said. But I'll earn it if you let me. She stood and crossed the space between them, laying her hand over his. Then we'll build something. Proper and slow. He turned his hand over, fingers closing around hers. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and slow, blanketing the roof with hush. Inside, nothing was hurried, nothing forced. Just two people beginning something new, stitch by stitch, breath by breath. The snow deepened by mid-November, settling in quiet along the ridgelines and softening the edges of everything it touched. The valley grew hushed under its weight, the world slower, measured. Keziah had taken to writing in the back of her mother's ledger after Norah fell asleep, small entries marked with dates and weather, things she'd noticed in Lawson, things she felt but hadn't yet spoken aloud. Her handwriting grew steadier with each entry. One morning, while Norah helped sweep the hearth, Lawson returned from the smokehouse with a wrapped cut of venison and an unexpected letter in his coat pocket delivered by the trapper from downriver who passed through twice each winter. He handed it to Keziah without comment, eyes unreadable. She turned it over in her hands, fingers tracing the postmark Helena, the name written in a script she hadn't seen since she'd fled the farm in Iowa. Her brother-in-law. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she stood by the window, watching Norah lay pine cones in a row across the sill. The tension in her shoulders returned like an old ache. He's still looking, she said finally, voice low. Lawson didn't press. He only said, you don't need to read it if you don't want to. I do, she replied. But not alone. Later, after Norah lay tucked beneath a quilt stitched from worn shirts and flour sacks, Keziah sat at the table and unfolded the letter. Lawson sat across from her, silent. The words were short, cold. An accusation dressed as concern. Claims of abandonment. Demands for Norah's return. A warning that he'd be coming west before the year turned. Her hands trembled, but she didn't cry. He's bluffing, Lawson said. He doesn't know where to look. Keziah shook her head. He's got money. Enough to follow records. Rail lines. Anything. Lawson leaned forward. Then we'll be ready if he does. She looked up sharply. You'd risk your name for us? I already did, he said. The rest is just living with it. In the days that followed, Keziah busied herself with things that steadied her. She helped render tallow for candles. She taught Norah to measure flour by touch. She mended the seams of Lawson's winter coat, sewing stronger stitches than the last. But something in her quiet changed. Her laugh came less easily. Her eyes tracked the road more often. One evening, she stood on the porch, arms folded tight as the wind cut down from the north. Lawson stepped out beside her, pulling his scarf higher. I've been thinking, she said, not looking at him. If he comes, he'll use the law. Say I ran without cause. You think a judge would send Norah back to that man? In Iowa? Maybe not. But here she paused. I'm not his kin. He's the only blood Norah's got besides me. Lawson's voice was even. She's got me now. Keziah turned to him. That's not something you say lightly. I didn't, he said. I've been thinking it for weeks. She searched his face. You mean to take us in proper? I mean to marry you, he said. Not out of pity. Not out of fear. Because I want to. She didn't answer at first. Her breath fogged in the cold. She looked out toward the trees where the wind stirred the branches and then back at him. I never thought I'd have a say in how my life turned out, she said. But I want that too. I want you. They married in the small church 3 miles east, where Lawson had once repaired the roof after a lightning strike. The preacher's wife lent Keziah a shawl sewn with faded green thread. Norah carried a sprig of cedar wrapped in twine. No guests. No music. Just quiet vows and the soft sound of snow melting on the chapel windows. Afterward, Lawson hitched the mare to the wagon, and they rode back slow, Norah nestled between them, her head against Keziah's side. The light was gold and low, catching on the frost-laced branches. When they reached the homestead, Lawson lifted Keziah down, her gloved hand steady in his. This is your place now, he said. She looked out at the pasture, the line of trees, the roof she'd helped mend, the smoke rising steady from the chimney. No, she corrected gently, it's ours. That night, after Norah had fallen asleep beneath the new quilt Keziah had pieced from scraps of her old life and Lawson's, they sat by the fire, their chairs close, the silence between them easy. Keziah reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. I don't want to run any more, she whispered. He touched her knuckles to his lips. You don't have to. And they sat like that, warm in the hush of their home, the firelight soft on their faces, the storm behind them, and something finer ahead, something they would build, day by day, with hands that had known work and hearts that had known fear and chose love anyway. By early December, the snow lay thick across the fields, muffling the world in white and forcing everything inward. The cabin had grown warmer not from the fire alone, but from the rhythm that had taken root within its walls. Keziah moved through the space as though it had always been hers, not with caution now, but with quiet certainty. Her belongings had found their places, stitched into the fabric of Lawson's life as naturally as winter followed fall. Lawson had taken to carving in the evenings, small things, handles for kitchen drawers, a whistle for Norah, a frame for one of Keziah's pressed herbs. He worked with care, shaping each piece like it mattered. And Keziah noticed. She noticed everything now. One morning, before the sun had risen past the tree line, Keziah stood near the stove, sorting dried elderberries into jars. Norah sat cross-legged on a bearskin rug, humming tunelessly while arranging buttons into circles. Lawson came in from the barn, brushing snow from his shoulders. "You got a visitor," he said, his voice clipped. Keziah froze. Her hand closed around the jar's rim.
"Who?"
"Stranger. Rode in from the south. Asked for shelter. Said he was looking for someone.
Brauncoat, weit brim hat."
Didn't give a name. She stepped away from the stove, her face pale. "He see Norah?"
"No."
"I sent her to the loft with the dog before he got close." Lawson's eyes didn't leave hers. "He's warming in the shed. Said he'd ride on come noon." Keziah's breath trembled, but she steadied it. "Does he match the letter?" Lawson nodded once. "Close enough. I should speak to him." "You don't have to."
"Ido."
Lawson didn't argue. He just reached for his coat again. "Then I'll be beside you." The shed was cold, the wind slipping in through the warped boards. The man stood near the far wall, rubbing his gloved hands together. His eyes lifted as Keziah stepped through the door. "Well," he said, voice rough with travel. "I'll be. Took me near a month to catch your trail." Her voice was low, tight. "You shouldn't have come." "I got rights," he said. "She's kin. And you ran." "I left because she wasn't safe," Keziah said. "And you know it." He stepped forward, boots crunching over straw. "What I know is you stole my brother's child. And I got papers saying I can take her back." Lawson stepped between them. "You've no authority here. This is Montana territory, not Iowa." The man's lip curled. "You marrying her don't make you her blood." Keziah didn't flinch. "No, but I'm what she has. And she's not leaving with you. You want to fight this in court?" "I'll fight it wherever I must," she said. "But you'll do it from somewhere else."
"You'll ride out now."
"You're not welcome here." The man looked at her long. Then he spat into the straw and turned. "You always were too proud. Just like your mother." Keziah didn't move until his horse disappeared into the trees. That night, she sat on the floor with Norah, brushing her hair slow. The fire cast soft shadows along the beams. Lawson sat nearby, sharpening the new blade he'd traded for in town the week before. "He won't stop," she said quietly. "I know." She looked over at him. "You still want this life? With us? Even with what follows behind?" He set the blade aside. "I didn't marry you for quiet. I married you because I believe in what we can build." She gave a small nod. "Then we'll build it fierce." In the weeks that followed, Keziah began teaching Norah her letters in earnest, using scraps of brown paper and charcoal. She kept her mother's ledger open beside her, showing how words held memory. Lawson reinforced the pasture gate, then added a second lock to the barn. They said little about the man who'd come and gone, but his presence lingered, sharpening their resolve. One afternoon, Keziah rode with Lawson to the edge of the property. Her hands had grown sure on the reins. She wore a thick wool coat stitched from two older ones, red thread visible at the seams. They dismounted by the stream that ran shallow beneath the ice. "I was thinking," Lawson said, kneeling to check the water's edge. "Come spring, we could dig out a trench. Feed this into a trough. Keep the livestock better through dry months." She crouched beside him. "And plant near it too. Herbs that need steady ground. We'll need to clear the slope by hand." She smiled. "Then we'll do it together." They didn't speak for a while after that, just listened to the creek gurgle under the ice and the wind tapping through the brush. Finally, Lawson turned to her. "Do you miss it?"
"What?"
"Iowa. The life before." She thought a long time before answering. "I miss pieces. My mother's singing. The smell of fresh soap. But not the way it ended. Not the silence I had to carry." Lawson nodded. "You don't have to carry it alone now." "I know." That evening, they built a cradle from pine boards Lawson had kept stacked in the loft. He hadn't asked if one was needed. She hadn't said it aloud. But when she brought his hand to her stomach, resting it gently where new life stirred beneath layers of wool, there were no questions left. He looked into her eyes, quiet and sure. "We'll raise them strong." She leaned in, her voice soft and steady. "And free." The snow melted slow that year, but the thaw came all the same. And with it, the promise that nothing planted in love would ever break beneath the weight of fear again. The last of the ice broke from the creek by mid-March, splitting and tumbling downstream as the thaw reached its full stretch. The cottonwoods wore buds, and the wind carried the scent of wet bark and earth waking from sleep. Keziah stood at the edge of the garden plot, her gloves damp with soil as she turned over the ground Lawson had loosened with a spade earlier that morning. Norah sat cross-legged nearby, piecing together a doll's dress from scraps of muslin and humming under her breath. Lawson walked up from the barn, his coat open, sleeves rolled to the elbow. "Fence along the north edge is near down," he said. "Cattle wander if we don't mend it soon." Keziah brushed a stray curl from her cheek, leaving a streak of soil across her temple. "I can help set the posts tomorrow, after I've finished sorting the dried beans for seed." He nodded, eyes resting on her longer than necessary. "You sure you're up to it?" "I wouldn't offer if I wasn't," she said, the edge in her voice softened by the warmth behind it. He stepped closer, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. Letter came. From Helena. Judge signed off on the adoption. Norah's name is changed in the county register. She's yours. And mine. Keziah didn't answer right away. She looked down at the paper, then toward Norah.
"She always was," she said.
"But now the world knows it too." Lawson took her hand. "You made that happen."
"No," she said.
"We did." They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing the rows. Norah helped with the twine lines, careful to keep her boots between the furrows. Keziah's back ached by sundown, but she didn't mention it. Lawson noticed anyway and set extra straw in the rocker near the hearth that night, tucking a folded quilt against the curve of her spine as she settled in. Later, after Norah had been carried to bed half asleep and the fire had burned low, Keziah leaned back with her eyes closed. "I've been thinking about the other women nearby. The ones who don't have someone looking out for them." Lawson looked up from his carving. "You want to help them?" "I think I already am. But I want to do more. There's space in the shed we cleared last month. It could be a place for learning. Not just herbs. Letters, numbers. Anything a woman might need to stand steadier." He nodded slowly. "You teach?"
"Some. And some would teach me."
"It'd be shared work." He set the carving aside. "We'll need more benches." "I know. I've got a list started." He smiled. "Of course you do." Spring settled in full when the first colt was born, long-limbed and coal-black. Norah named him Button and insisted on feeding him oats by hand. Keziah began walking farther each day, her growing belly leading her pace. She spent mornings at the writing desk Lawson built for her from old barnwood, penning letters to women she'd met at church or passed in town. Some wrote back. Some came through the gate weeks later with small satchels and uncertain eyes. Lawson cleared time between chores to add a window to the shed, then a chimney. Keziah hung dried bundles from the rafters and laid her mother's ledger on the shelf, its spine cracked but intact. Lessons began in late April. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the porch steps and the bees moved slow through the lilacs, Keziah sat with her feet resting on a stool, shelling peas into a tin basin. She paused when she heard the gate creak. A rider approached, tall, broad-shouldered, the same man who'd threatened her months before. He dismounted without a word. Lawson stepped out from the barn, rifle slung across his back. "You weren't invited," he said, calm but firm. The man raised both hands. "I ain't come to take her. I've got no claim anymore. Just thought." He looked at Keziah. "Just thought I ought to say I was wrong." Keziah stood slowly. "You were," she said, But you're here now. Say what you need, then go. He shifted his weight. I was angry. Thought I knew better. I didn't. You were right to leave. I see that now. She didn't soften. Then let that be the last thing you carry from that place. He nodded, climbed back onto his horse, and rode off without another word. Lawson watched until he was gone from sight. You all right? He asked. I'm finished with that part of my life, she said. It has no place here. By June, the crops were strong, and the women's school met twice a week. Norah had learned to read aloud and had taken to writing stories of her own, always about a girl who rode horses and never got lost. Lawson repaired the saddle straps and built a cradle for the coming child, its joints sanded smooth and rubbed with beeswax. One morning, as Keziah hung linens in the early breeze, she felt a sharp tightening in her belly. She leaned against the line, breath caught. Lawson was at her side in seconds. It's time, she nodded, gripping his hand. It's time. The midwife came before dusk. The labor was long but steady. Keziah bore it in silence, teeth clenched, hands firm around the quilt Lawson laid beneath her. At dawn, a newborn's cry broke through the stillness. A boy, healthy and full-voiced, with his father's eyes and his mother's mouth. Lawson lifted him gently, then looked at Keziah, who lay back, damp curls stuck to her brow. Name, the midwife asked. Keziah didn't hesitate.
Jonah.
After my father. Lawson leaned down and kissed her forehead. He'll be raised with strength. And quiet, she added, smiling faintly. And love. The days that followed were full of learning new rhythms, of Norah whispering stories to her baby brother, of neighbors bringing preserves and blankets. The women who had once come out of need now came for joy too, for the comfort of shared work and steady voices. The land grew green around them, wildflowers thick along the fence posts. One warm evening, as fireflies sparked above the grass, Keziah and Lawson sat on the porch, Jonah asleep in her arms, Norah curled at their feet. Lawson reached over and ran a callous thumb along the back of her hand. You made this, he said. All of it. We did, she replied. Together. He leaned in, brushing his lips against her cheek, then her mouth. It was a kiss without urgency, full of promise already fulfilled. She rested her head against his shoulder, eyes on the horizon where the sun dipped low behind the hills. I never thought I'd find a life like this, she whispered. He wrapped his arm around her, drawing her closer. You didn't find it. You built it. And as the wind moved gentle through the cottonwoods and the last light faded into stars, they sat together, husband and wife, mother and father, builder and healer, held not by circumstance, but by the quiet, enduring truth of a love that had been earned and would remain. Always.